Just picking up the, did you want to pick up the question of special interest at this point?
Yes,
or are we
please,
going to pick
absolutely.
That in a minute?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I, from my point of view, as an HS manager, I regard the BMA as a highly effective trade union, I have to say. Very well organised, well resourced, and very on the ball. But I have to say, on the ground, obviously the BMA represent medical staff, and on the ground I find that, generally speaking, our medical staff really want to get engaged in influencing events, particularly if, and I think the trick there, which I think we're, in the whole of the NHS, we're getting better at as time goes on, is to engage them, and this applies to most professional groups, at a level where it's most meaningful to them, which is, for example, in the redesign of care pathways or in the organisation of their own service, rather than that's complementary to what we tried to do before, is attempted to get more engaged, or attempted to get engagement at the sort of corporate level. You need that as well, but you really need to start very much at the sort of specialty or service delivery level, and then I mean, all the consultants I've ever worked with have been extremely interested in doing that, and also pretty realistic about how things work. So you know, that would be my thoughts about that.
What about the question that I thought was very interesting about, you know, if you haven't really started but you really want to do it, how do you develop engagement faced with difficult in the bad times as opposed to the good times? I think you know, basically everybody, I saw lots of nods at that question. I think everybody in the room is trying to kind of grapple with this. What about, I mean, you started in the good times, it's true, but what's your reflection now?
Yeah, well, we actually, I don't tend to talk about this too much these days because it's been sort of airbrushed out of history. But at one point we were in financial turnaround along with a lot of other people, if you go back far enough, and we it was really quite difficult and for everybody, and we had quite a lot of job losses and so on. And we actually started a listening to action programme not that long after that. So as you can imagine, it was actually quite a difficult place to start. I know it's the other way around, but I think what it demonstrates is that there's never a wrong time, and I would certainly echo the sentiments from earlier in the day, that it has never been more important. I absolutely reject the idea that you can't engage in difficult times. That is, or you shouldn't engage in difficult times. You batten down the hatches. That strikes me as completely wrong, and will lead to a much worse outcome. I mean, the fact is, we're faced with a difficult situation, aren't we? It doesn't matter whose fault it is. We're just where we are. If management, if you like, attempts to make change without engaging the people who are actually delivering services, and if those people don't engage in the process in reciprocation, it'll be a disaster. There's no doubt about that. It will be very difficult anyway, but that just strikes me as all the more important. I think the way to overcome the problem of sort of starting, if you like, from a sort of low engagement base is, as I said, just be, for the sake of repetition, just be very straightforward with the messages and reinforce the fact that it's more important than ever. And certainly, what really impressed me when we started our engagement process, and this is mirrored around other people who've done similar things, of which particularly in the West Midlands there's quite a few, because there's been a sort of regional rollout of this, is that staff really get into it very quickly. There was very little in the way of standoffishness and that sort of things, partially, I think, to do with the process, which is quickly energising, as I mentioned at the beginning. But people want to get involved. They're passionate about the services they deliver. This is the case across the public sector. Why wouldn't they be? If you make it accessible, if you facilitate that, off you go. And I don't think it matters if it's difficult times. Probably more important.
Okay, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess coming from a policing background, what I would say first of all is, you know, we've had experience of delivering bad news, and being honest about that delivery of bad news is critical in I suggest, any environment. I listened to interest about the questions because I suppose I'm coming from a background where, certainly as a serving police officer, I've been protected with the arrangements, and even I would say that most policing circumstances now are actually, situations are a 50-50 split of sworn officers and police staff, all of whom I think in the past have felt that they've got very secure jobs. I came here this morning knowing that we're expected to make 25% cuts just like everybody else. That means laying people off. Very difficult, and again, you have to give that answer, or you have to give that position very honestly to people. When Zoe mentioned some of the difficulties in that area, well, yeah, how do you deal with that? But I would say, in a small way, that perhaps are some opportunities in the sense that if you've got to deliver a service without the funds, and I at the moment are trying to deliver something on an international scale, it's a small scale, I accept that, but without government funding. I mean, they've put some pump priming money in and then they've stopped the money, so we have to go and find that money. And it does force you to think innovatively about where you're going to get that money from. Taking staff with you, I think, on this is important, but it is a case of having to deliver bad news honestly. Something that's a bit unusual from my sector, so we're learning as we go.
What about the special interest groups? Have you got a view about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, people mention very powerful individuals and powerful organisations and refer to the BMA. Of course, I sit within a very powerful special interest group, ACPO, Chief Constables, who've got quite significant autonomy, operational autonomy, and I think they'll retain that. Of course, what we now hear government suggesting is there will be appointed commissioners, which will be quite interesting, a development for chief officers who have been able, within reason, to run their police areas as they saw fit, with what some would describe as not the levels of accountability that I expect we're going to get now with the appointment of police commissioners. So, yeah, very powerful, some would say self-interest group, very professional, want to deliver good services in their area, want to protect services. But I think even historically they've found, whilst they've been able to resist some of those sort of pressures, they're not going to be able to do that as we go forward from today.
Thanks very much. Anthony.
I think what's heartening for me today is that this mix of people at the sharp end and trade unions, and I've lived and worked in the last 25 years in many European countries, and I think the success there, when I look at my benchmark is Germany, I think Scandinavia and Holland, where co-determination, the Works Council has led much more to people sitting around a table and having more honesty about what, say, business is being faced with and how they're going to work through it. And when I look back, when I studied industrial relations first time, I think the picture in the UK is very different. And I think that we have an opportunity at the moment to move more to the continental European of co-determination and Works Council type working rather than confrontation. I think the second thing is that if you look at society as a whole, in the last 20 years or so, there's been a trend, the UK is following the US, that a significant number of people don't believe that they can make a difference to their own lives. It's called locus of control, if you want this kind of technical term, the external locus of control versus internal. And so I think when you talk about engagement, if you don't understand, for example, your workforce, how many people have you got with an internal versus external locus of control, because it's all well and good trying to engage people, but if they don't believe they can make a difference to their own lives, their own careers, their own health, for example, then it doesn't matter if you try to engage because they won't react. And I think that this is an area from a societal point of view that is very misunderstood and least managed within the UK. In fact, most line managers have never even heard of the concept, and that's frightening if in terms of the kind of change that we're going to talk about and engagement.
Thank you very much. Right, more contributions on the floor? There's a lady here. There's a gentleman at the back over there. There's, yeah, somebody right there. Okay, yes, please.
Elizabeth Cameron, Salford City Council. I'm chair of the branch there, but also a manager in local government. Just interested in the last point, really, hearing about the locus control and just this idea that people making a difference with their own lives. I mean, the sorts of people who are our members now who are going to be particularly concerned if you look at the advances that there have been, you know, particularly over the last 10 years, since, for example, the DDA came out. You know, we're looking at disabled people being able to get back into work, but they've needed assistance around that. These are people who are going to be most concerned now and see very much as though, you know, they're going to be gunned for. You know, the people who know they can't deliver a 365-day week in the same way as other people, or who need additional advances. You know, those people are particularly thinking that they will be, well, they'll be spearheaded really and looked at, and are in more fear of the danger of losing their occupations sooner than other people.
Thank you. Is the gentleman at the back? Yes.